I'm going to start recording. Welcome everyone to Charts Chat. Remember, this is recorded, so don't say anything you don't want up on YouTube for the world to see. This is for January 9th, 2018, our first Charts Chat of the year. We've got a number of discussion topics listed here. Unfortunately, I feel like I put way too many of them on there this time again. So I guess I can rattle through them. If you've got them up, the first one up, we can start rattling through these. GitHub IDs as the maintainer names. As I was reviewing charts, the reason this came up was there are a number of companies who wanted to put their company name in there or their company org in there. And so I'm looking at this going, how should we do this? Should we expect real people, especially since we're now starting to go towards owner files? Or was there a reason behind it? I understand the contacting thing because there's a couple of owners who don't have their names or their listed email addresses on their GitHub org ID. So I have no idea who to carbon copy into a PR review or something. So I totally understand that. But I was just wondering on thoughts on this.
I think it would be an additional field if you wanted company and have a company contact or something like that, because we need the people, right? Like we need to be able to, we at least need a person to contact. I think if we have the company in there, like let's say there's a critical something rather, who are we responding to on the other side of that? If they want to do an alias, I guess that's okay, but not just like, info@company.org. You know what I mean?
So I think we had this issue with the Bitnami bot where, we kind of used Bitnami bot and the containers at bitnami.com email address for all of the Bitnami charts, but then made it difficult to actually find out, who at Bitnami was actually maintaining these. And I think now that we have the owner's file, that's obviously more clear. And I also think that the chart.yaml should represent what's in the owner's file. And I agree with Vic's remark about just having actual people on there, and as that changes, we can update the charts and change those people as well. But in terms of just adding a company, if you do want a company there, I think given the GitHub ID can also be an organization ID, I think it's totally fine if someone wants to put a company GitHub ID inside the chart.yaml. I don't.
Well, what's the motivation, Matt, that you see for having the company? Is it that they want, basically by proxy, they want to be able to decide and never update the owner's file?
Well, in one case, it was, they said, well, it could be anybody at this company who goes and does it. So we want to have the company name there. And then so it's somebody who's associated with that company can come in and do it for us. And my pushback was, well, we actually want people to carbon copy in on PRs and to pull in to review these things. So we really need names. But this was expressed by others. And so that's the reason I thought I'd bring it up.
The other thing is there may be somebody at a company who does this as a task, and then if they leave or they get fired, the company wants somebody else to do the task. But in the meantime, how do we know who's allowed to say who the new person is?
I think we have that problem no matter what, even if we have a company there, a company name there, because anybody from that company could come in and say, hey, actually, I'm the maintainer now. And so we wouldn't be able to, decide whether they're authoritative or not.
Well, that's kind of how things go in open source, though, right? If
they do the work,
the people, not the company.
If someone comes in and does the work with an company email address, then they put their name down, and that company now has their name there. And then the next person from that company that needs to or wants to take it over, they put their name. And we don't right now have a deprecation process, and I know we want to work towards something like that. But that's the case there is when nobody from that company updates it for a while, it goes into a deprecation state, and then they need to pick it back up, or another company can pick it up.
Okay.
And we don't have there's no real verification policy to say, hey, are you really the owner of this application? Right? Isn't it more just purely a good faith volunteer process right now?
Well, and that's how it is in a lot of places, right? If you go to homebrew packages, right, for Mac, you're going to find lots of people who don't do the app, do the packaging for the particular app, right? This is not an unusual thing to have, the folks who create curl don't go to every Linux distro and deal with the packaging. And so it's not unusual to have other people do that, and we do see a fair amount of that, I guess, in the church repo. Okay. So I guess we can say it's okay to have a company, but we always want a real person.
I think that's the fair way to do it.
You know, I was also thinking that we don't really have any lines stating anywhere what our policy is for revoking someone's ownership, right?
No.
But we do have don't we share, I mean, I'm sorry that I didn't look this up before I spoke it, but since we're on the call together, don't we share just the code of conduct? And so if something like that gets broken, at least there's that. But then what if someone's just not, what if someone screws up? You know, like we've got someone going rogue. I think, what would our policy be then? I mean, would the good faith just be gone then, and then we just kind of remove it to avoid problems? And should we have to note that, or is it better just keep that informal?
Would that be arguably then a violation of the code of conduct?
Yeah, I mean, again, I would think probably. It's lucky that we haven't had to deal with this, but it does seem like we're talking about scaling now, right?
I think one of the reasons we haven't had to deal with this so far is because only we could merge PRs previously, or only the chart maintainers could merge PRs. And now that we're opening up the ability for more people to merge PRs, as long as they're in a Kubernetes org, there is obviously more potential for this problem. It's a good question. I don't know how the Kubernetes upstream implements the code of conduct and how they deal with these issues, but I'm sure Matt, you probably know someone to talk to around that.
Yeah, I do. As far as I know, it's only come up a couple of times, and the steering committee is tasked with going and figuring it out. What it is there's a code of conduct. Everybody can go read it. And if there's a violation of that, there is one or more email addresses you can contact people privately to start chasing down how it happens. And most of the stuff is handled very quietly offline. I don't think it's ever been or I don't know of any case where somebody's had to have their stuff revoked. Everything has been handled fairly quietly so as not to publicly embarrass people or anything like that, and politely to this point. And so I don't know how it's handled, but there is a process where they reach out, and then I think in our case, although who knows, they would come to the chart maintainers and say, okay, we've got a problem, now we need to talk about something. It's not something we necessarily have to deal with. In fact, I think like other projects, they want to eventually have a code of conduct committee where it's a set group of people for all of Kubernetes, just like Drupal does and these other projects do, where they know how to handle these code of conduct things, and then they make sure it's taken care of right. And then if they needed to work with us on charts, they'd come to us.
Perfect.
Thanks. Yeah, I think the good thing is, we're not alone here. We do have the steering committee and the greater Kubernetes project and the CNCF for that matter at our disposal, I guess, when it comes to issues like this.
Yeah. Okay. I put a note in the discussion on what we decided for the GitHub IDs in that, although we did veer a little off of. Are we good with this one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The next one was actually handling the deprecation of charts. There are a few charts that are deprecated, and this came up because there was a PR to go change the vanity URL to k8s.gcr.io from gcr.io/ Google or whatever containers where the Kubernetes containers were put. And that was changed to vanity URL, and it came to an issue. You can link to 3167. And one of the things came up was this was for a deprecated chart in one case. And then we noticed we just put deprecated on it. And then Adnan and I got into a discussion, well, do we move deprecated into a different directory? What do we do these things? Okay, so maybe we just delete deprecated, or this deprecated chart. Well, maybe somebody comes in with a new chart with the same name, and they start over on versioning, and next thing you know, they start overwriting some of the versions, but not others that are in our bucket, and we've run into problems, right? And so the proposal that I had, and I was spitballing, was we leave it, we put deprecated on it. Maybe we put a comment in there that says this chart is deprecated to undeprecated. You need to bump a major version or start supporting it and remove the deprecated, and you need new maintainers here, right? We put something in there like a comment, and then we have CI say if it's got deprecated, always fail CI. right? Because you actually have to say we're undeprecating it for something like this to happen, but then it leaves it in the repo, but it tells everybody that it's deprecated. But then if somebody comes along with another chart of the same name, we're not going to run into numbering issues. That was my spitball proposal. Does anybody have a better idea or something on how we can handle this?
I think that's a good first cut. I mean, what we want is for people to know, right? That's the main thing, and then to be able to toggle it on and off, which I think that's enough of a red light, green light situation that explicitly we know who turned it back on and who turned it off and how long it's been off and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's a useful enough, and I would imagine relatively simple with how we're running CI today.
That would be pretty easy with CI today, yeah.
Yeah, man, that sounds good.
Yeah, when I originally kind of wrote up the guidelines for this, for how we deal with these deprecated charts, I added a comment about deleting the charts from the repo, but Matt kind of rightly raised the issue that if we delete it, how do we know what version to restore it to if we want to restore one with the same name? And that's actually a big reason, I think, to just keeping it in there, so we know we have that reference and it's easy to find. And also, if someone's just going through the repo or looking through the list of charts, they get a message and read me or something that the chart's deprecated. So yeah, I'm definitely for that. And the CI, now that we have that ability through the Circle CI stuff, I think that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, I can go ahead and put the comment on any of the ones we have that are deprecated now, and do the CI bit. I can start working on that.
Is that something that can be added to the chart file itself? Just its status?
Deprecated?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I didn't quite realize that.
Yeah, there's a few.
Yeah, there's a deprecated field in the chart spec, and what we also usually do is update the notes.txt as well as the README in the chart repo, so people actually see it. Because Helm doesn't actually treat the deprecated flag with anything special. It's there in the spec, but Helm doesn't actually use it. It was actually added for things like Monocular so that they can filter them out.
That makes sense. I didn't see that. That's great.
And actually, speaking of Monocular, when I was working on revamping some of the chart syncing logic, I noticed that there's a lot of charts that haven't been marked as deprecated that should be. In particular, things that have moved from incubator to stable should be marked as deprecated in incubator and not. So I think we need to go back and review what things have been moved and figure out what actually should be deprecated and what shouldn't. So I'm happy to take that task on.
Okay.
Awesome. And if you need someone to push some buttons on some PRs or anything like that, or review, if you do a full lot of them, I'm happy to help.
Cool. Thanks, Vic.
Okay. All right. We good on this one then? On the deprecation?
Yep.
Awesome. The next one is kind of a funny one. Somebody brought up in an issue. It's issue 3002. So check this out. If you had to say greater than or less than, right, is version 1.0 greater than or less than version 9? So, right, 10 less than 9, string comparison. Which is greater? 9, because 9 is a greater number than 1, the first number you compare on. And so if you go look at this issue, we've got in our files, if the capabilities major 1 and capabilities minor is greater than 7, right? Well, as soon as we hit this 1.0 release that's about to come out in Kubernetes 1.10, 1.10 is less than 0.9 because we're doing string comparisons here. I didn't even think about it, but it totally is true. Helm does have a way of handling this because it handles semver. Helm can do semantic versions. And so we're going to need to rewrite all of these things with semantic versions. Helm.
So Helm like has the major minor like sub element of things, or how does, or is it like Sprig that actually has some?
It's Sprig. Sprig can do semver stuff.
Gotcha.
And so you can say, is it, these versions and do the comparison. But yeah, it's we have to go in and fix this, or our stuff's going to start failing when 1.10 is released. And so I wanted to bring it up here so you all would know that this greater than and less than and equal to major and minor is going to have to change. I can file PRs to start changing this unless somebody else wants to.
Do we, would CI fail in this case right now, or no?
No.
It'd just like be a silent failure. Some feature would be disabled, basically, of a random chart.
Yeah, random charts would just start failing in 10. Or it would start acting incorrectly. Because, like here, in the example it says greater than 7. Well, when 10 comes out, 1 is not greater than 7, so whatever was in there wouldn't be included.
That exact issue is why GNU sort has a command line flag to choose whether you want strict string sorting or numeric sorting.
Yeah. And Sprig has the ability to do the version comparisons for us, rather than using the greater than, less than, equal to that's built into the Go template that's string based. So we've got the parts there. We just need to rewrite it. And I wanted to bring it up because I always thought this was great, and I had no idea.
This might actually be a good time to also take a look at what we're doing with the version checking and see if it actually makes sense anymore. If we're committed to supporting NN -1, we may be able to remove some of the 1.7 specific stuff or 1.6 specific stuff.
Good point.
All right.
It might also be good to note this in our best practices doc.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we get to it.
I signed up for too many things. All right. Now one of the things to note that's being worked on right now, there's a PR for it in Helm, is actually putting in checking a field into the chart YAML for the Kubernetes versions that are supported as semantic versions ranges. So that's one of the PRs being worked on right now. It won't be in the next release of Helm, but it probably will come out in a 2.something release in the next few months. All right. Oh, okay. All right. So the next one I had here. Somebody did something neat. If you go look at the pull request 3200, if you look at that pull request, what you'll see is there are no image tags. If you look at the values.yaml file, he removed them. And what he did instead was he created a helper function in helpers.tpl that grabs the default, the chart.version, or what's in the image version. So if the image version is empty, it uses the chart.app version as the tag version.
Interesting.
And I thought this was rather neat. And so I wanted to know what people thought of that. At first I commented, what? You remove these? We need the version in there. We don't just want to grab latest. And I'm like, then he pointed that out and I had glossed over it. And I'm curious what people think of this pattern.
I think it's interesting, but it's a little implicit versus explicit. I like the explicit, here's the thing that we're doing and here's the change and that kind of thing. If this is how we did it across the board, I think it'd be a lot easier to kind of be like, yeah, that's the right way to do it. But since there's differences among the charts, I prefer being explicit, but it's neat. Makes it easier for the pull request, although minimally, right? Because you're not changing one more line, basically, for your pull request.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's a big issue, but I do like it. The only thing I would say is if we do want to start doing this, then I would just add a comment above the version in the values.yaml.
That's a great point.
To look at the app version.
Yeah.
Because most people, when they're looking to configure the tag, we'll look at this. We'll look at the values.yaml, but a lot of people don't actually care if they're just installing the chart directly. So I think it's fine to actually use app version. I think this is actually a good use case for it. So
One negative side effect that I can see is that you don't have a way to override that with a set command or your own values file command.
You do it.
Wait,
Yeah.
or did I misunderstand?
Oh
Are
yeah,
you
because
saying
the
that
image tag is still there. It's just left as an empty field. So if you set it, that's what's used.
Oh, it's optional. I see.
It's optional.
Got
And
it.
so you would set it the way you always have. It's empty here. And so it's one less YAML line to change when you're updating something.
I see. I misinterpreted that. There we go. Yeah, that makes sense.
there's actually a template that basically calls default on it. So if it's not set, it will just set it to
I gotcha.
app version, which is pretty neat. Yeah.
I gotcha. That is pretty neat. Especially, well, I mean, obviously only for apps whose tags match their public version, whose tags name convention. They might not. But.
Yeah, and that's a good point because it may not work across the board. There may be an app that has multiple components which all have different versions, and that doesn't quite work. But I think for most cases, this is actually pretty nice.
Yeah, it does seem neat. It does seem nice.
I don't know. It's a neat hack, but I don't know that it's functionally any different than just shipping a default value in values.yaml and calling it a day.
I think that the one plus here then, just to sort of take back what I was saying before, is that it's just more dry. You would have less mismatches. I bet if we look through our charts, we might find a couple of mismatches. No, I don't know. We may be totally up to date right now, but where someone doesn't update the chart version, or someone,
Mm-hmm.
I think you should update the README, because the README, the config table lists the version as empty. So there should be a reference that is taken from the chart version.
Yeah, agreed. If we do want to add this, I think more documentation needs to be there to actually explain what's happening.
Yeah.
Where I think this would be useful is, I think this chart, I can't really think of it right now, but there is a chart that I've seen that uses the same tag version for multiple components in the values.yaml, and this would be really a much better way of doing that. But, as people have said, like if for this one where you're just putting it in two places, it's not a big deal.
So what do y'all think? Because I've heard cases on both sides. If we go this route, we definitely need more documentation surrounding it, and we'd probably want to start using it as a more common pattern, so it becomes more obvious and get it documented everywhere. But it is also more implicit than explicit. And so it might be a little bit, I noticed a few folks here didn't catch on to it right away. There were some questions to submit, and so the question is, it's not as explicit. Do we want to be more verbose and a little bit more repeat yourself to be more explicit or not? I don't actually have a preference either way on it, and that's why I'm just curious. I don't know what people think here. It seems to be a little divided.
My
and I'm not
gut
sure what we should
tells
do.
me that this shouldn't be the default way of doing it, but that it should be an accepted pattern if it actually is making things less complex. Like in this particular case, I don't think it would be what I would prefer, because it almost seems like it takes longer to explain it than it does to just put the same value two places. But if you have like cases where you have the same value in a whole bunch of different places and you want an easy way to default to the same thing for all of them, then it might be something where we go, oh yeah, you can just do that. There's a pattern for that.
Yeah, would be a good compromise.
Yeah, I think that's sound, actually. I think that makes sense to me.
So I wouldn't put it down as a best practice, but yeah.
So we wouldn't put it down as a best practice, but we would allow it if somebody wants to do it?
Yeah, kind of, I guess.
It's interesting. I mean, if a lot of what's happening within charts templates doesn't really follow all of Go's, design principles, because it uses different languages, and it's, but I do, after just hearing all of what was said, I think was it Vic who said that, or was it? I'm not sure who said earlier that they prefer the explicit. I would say as a rule, explicit wins, just because if the goal is to save energy, you waste more time with the confusion of with the extra layers of complexity. You know, if they win you a lot, great. If they don't win you a lot, just don't do it. You know. Same with Go functions, for example. You can overload them. I mean, you can't overload them, but you can, you know, say pass a struct in. This is a sort of way of cheating overloading, but that's frowned upon because you lose a lot of other, you know, you lose, you know, type checks and you lose other things, but you gain flexibility. So the only projects that do things like that are when there's a massive gain. You know, I don't know. It might be nice to follow that here as our principle, mainly because we do have a lot of extra complexity, and maybe it's nice to keep things simple where we can as our general rule.
Okay. Would you like me to go back then and say, so what I'm hearing is it's a neat pattern. In complex situations, we could see somebody using it, but for something fairly straightforward like this, we'd like to keep it more explicit because that'll be easier for people to follow, even if it's a little bit of extra work to update the tag in the different places. So we're moving the complexity more onto the authors than the consumers. Is that what I heard?
Yeah. And that was something I was also going to say is it's not so much just what the authors want, it's also what is easy for users to understand and use correctly.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I'll follow up on this issue. All right, and then I had another one then to move on to the next one. I'll follow up on that one. There were, in the incubator web page test charts that there's pull requests for, there were calls out to EC2 because they actually have VM images in EC2 as well that you can give your EC2 creds to and interact with. And I wasn't aware of us doing charts that said, oh, we can do this interaction with this particular public cloud and we can put it in the values YAML. Now, it is an incubator chart. It's not a full-on stable chart or anything like that. And they're working through things. This is everybody familiar with web page test?
No, I don't think so.
Really? You're okay, so web page test, webpagetest.org, if you go there, but you can run these yourself. It's a way to basically pass it a site in a location, and then it can actually test out the web performance of this. Yeah. And you can run this yourself, and there's a difference between kind of a controller and agents. And the agents they've got them set up in EC2 VM images, so you can just give it creds, and then it'll know how to go work with those images over there. Or there's actually a chart for agents too that you can run yourself. But they do have the ability to pass in EC2 creds via the PR. And I actually don't know how we handle those kinds of cases where it's just one public cloud provider in that. Or if we say, no, we don't want to do this, we want to make them generic so you can run them anywhere, don't have to pass that in, or it's okay even if you run it on your own because somebody has to opt in and say, oh, I really know I'm doing EC2. I have no idea where we stand on that. So I wanted to ask.
Is that a limitation of this specific application though?
Some of it I think has to do with this application, but you can run the agents on your own as a chart. That's just the way that one of the things that they're offering because the images, I guess, are just available in EC2 to use.
Wait, so this might be a silly question, but so if the agent's running in EC2, what's running in the cluster? What does the chart actually run? You'll
end up having the controller, and then it'll probably be most effective, I think, if you're running all of it in Amazon. So if you're running your Kubernetes cluster in Amazon, which a whole lot of people do now, then you'll get the benefit of just working with another thing, and then you're managing the part that manages everything in it.
Right, okay.
I think.
That's so funny. It seems like what you'd almost want to do is update this application to accept pods, you know?
Well, that's a separate one. They do have a PR for the agent to run in the cluster as well. So you can have the agent run as a VM in EC2 or something in the cluster. And when it is in EC2, you pass in your EC2 creds in your values YAML file.
Wow.
And I'm just wondering, is that kosher? I have no idea. I don't think I've encountered or thought about this before.
Wouldn't the creds be a secret, though, that you have to manage on your own separately, just in terms of other best practices that have nothing to do with whether it's on Amazon or some other place?
I mean, yeah, that's the best practice, and I'll go back, and I didn't even look at it. When I caught that, I said, I'm going to ask before I spend a whole lot of time dealing with that. You're right.
Right.
You'd want to have it as a secret. But yeah.
But I hear what you're saying. Does it seem too cloud provider specific?
Yeah.
We have other. There was another. And actually there are several, right? But there was one. I'm kind of losing my memory thread about it. But there was a dashboard for a Microsoft project that can only be run. It really only makes sense to run on Azure. Do you recall what I'm thinking of within the charts repo? It was some kind of
There are a couple of like cloud specific things, like the ACS engine autoscaler, and I think there's a similar one for EC2.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I'm not sure about GKE. I think that could be seen as like a, more of a specific case where it's actually really useful in Kubernetes. This I'm not so sure about. Is it possible to run web page tests on other clouds? Like, could someone come along in the future and add support for, GKE or?
Probably. I don't see why not. Let me go find it.
And if that were the case, well, actually, I guess that's a good question. Could we just genericize the name of the credentials?
Well,
just what those names are
probably not.
called, and then.
Here are the PRs, if you want to go take a quick look
Okay.
at them. There's the agent and the server. The server is the one that has the EC2 bits.
I feel like I don't really have all the knowledge of web page tests to be able to make a decision on this.
Yeah, web page test should not be specific enough that you can only run it in one place.
Okay.
It should not be. Let's see. It shouldn't be one of those things that you can only run in one location. I think I remember people running it on their own, although it's been a while.
Because the other thing you could draw a parallel to is something like the Datadog chart, for example, which is obviously very specific to Datadog, but allows you to connect it to your Kubernetes cluster, which is very useful.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not going to work with New Relic. You need to use the New Relic chart for that. So that I don't know if it falls into that category. The other option is, since there is a server and an agent, maybe the server should deploy the agent as a child chart, or the other way around, whichever one makes sense.
Well, how about I ask this? Because, I've dropped a link into the pull request. Can you all go take a look at it and just see what you think on this? I can deal with the application-specific parts on it if nobody else wants to. I've used web page test. I've never deployed it, but I'm familiar enough with using it. I think you can run it in different places, and I can chase that down. But just the style and the way that they're using EC2, just take a look at it and give feedback. I'm not sure. I was okay with it, but I thought I would ask because I try to be fairly cloud provider neutral in everything I do, especially since so many people like to run things on premise.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, the author of these charts is really, he is very flexible and willing to work. Like, Upstream isn't tagging things yet at this point, and so he's going to carry tags separately when he knows releases are happening or when he knows it's good enough where you can tag it. He really wants to make this work, and so he's being super cool. But
I gotcha. Yeah. It sounds like, I see.
And it's incubator. It's not stable.
Yeah.
Honestly, I have no qualms about even having this in stable. If we wanted to, if the way I see it, like if it is something that can be, that is currently cloud specific, it should be mentioned in the README. And if someone wants to go and implement support for another cloud in the future or some other way of deploying it, then they can go and, contribute to the chart. But I don't think that should necessarily stop it from being added initially.
Yeah, and that stuff is all namespaced, so it is at least, it's not hard to isolate and or add on to.
Yeah.
Right.
And without knowing, what the different options are right now, it's a little bit difficult to decide on how those things should be keyed, and we can always change the way they're keyed in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The main thing that and I'll just make a comment on this right now, but the main thing that I would just recommend is that we not we not even recommend people add their key and secret into values for a chart. I mean, that's something that we have other Kubernetes objects for. You know what I mean? Like, we can set those as environment variables or something based on a secret. You know, we do that elsewhere. You know what I mean? Certain charts expect you to create a secret if there's something sensitive.
And well, there's some charts now where you can pass in the information. You can either pass in the name of the secret, or you can pass in the information you want it to use, and it'll create the secret. That is a pattern that we have now.
Oh, right. That's true.
Yeah, I think leaving that up to
That's true.
the person deploying it is probably the best option.
Okay.
Yeah. But, you know,
Fair.
we can help them get the first one in and give them recommendations for follow-ups as well. We don't want to block until they've implemented every possible feature if somebody's willing to continue to work on it. At least I don't think so. I'd like to really kind of get them motivated and being interested in contributing rather than us being a pain in the neck and them walking away cursing our names.
It looks cool.
Okay. All right. I can follow up on this, but I do ask that the rest of you could take a quick look at this and give some 2 cents because it's a neat, different one. All right. Then the last one listed here is, should we change our back best practices? And then it links to a discussion. And I don't think I did I do this one?
I put that one.
You put that one in. Awesome.
Okay, so this is actually, yeah, if you want to read this, it's a kind of a lengthy thread meanwhile. It's a pull request I created for JetStack's Cert Manager. And basically, I made some improvements, applied best practices and so on, and also RBAC stuff. And so basically, when I applied that, I applied our current best practices, and we actually found out that what is documented is not what we currently use as best practices. So the question is, do we have to change something? So I don't know if you're familiar with the RBAC stuff. So currently what we do is we set RBAC.create. If it's true, we create RBAC resources and create a service account, which is named by the full name template. And if RBAC.create is false, we do not create RBAC resources, and we use the service account specified with RBAC.service account name. That's how it currently works. And this was, I think, invented by Michael. And what is documented is that the service account name should never be ignored and should actually be used instead of using the full name template for the service account name. So the question is, should we change it or should we keep it this way? I mean, generally we have the best practice of using the full name template for resource name. The question is, should we really do this differently for service accounts? And yeah, there's more in this discussion, and Kenzie also contributed because I pinged him. And in general, I would say we should not make it too complicated. And the way it is now, I think it's fairly easy to understand. It basically allows us to manage RBAC resources within the chart or externally. So this is basically more or less all we need, I would say. Kenzie's argument was companies may require special names for specific policies for names for service accounts, which would not fit into this. I would tend to say if a company requires special names, they would probably also require special names for other resource types, or may not even allow to use public clouds, so they would have to roll their own anyways. So I tend to not want to change it as we do it and adapt the documentation, but I'm open to any discussions. So I know Kenzie has a different opinion, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, because I know a lot of the time there is actually special naming around, specifically around credentials. And so a service account is basically a credential. And so where that fits into a lot of security policy that already exists is you would treat it like a username. And usernames often have very strict conventions around how they're named. So, or, you know, service account names around how they're named. So I want people to be able to always say this account should be named this, and have that never be ignored if specified. But at the same time, the documentation right now implies that you're required to specify it. And the point was made that you shouldn't have to specify it if you don't want to, and if you don't, then it should just be auto-generated, which I agree with.
One thing that I would say about this is that the name is confusing. If it's called service class name, then to me that sounds like it's used everywhere. We may have to add a comment saying, this is only used if rback.enabled rback.created is false. The other option is some charts. I think for persistent volume claims, they have a parameter called existing claim, which allows you to just give the name of an existing volume claim rather than have it create one for you. So we could use that same existing key and call this existing service class name or something like that, so that people can at least. My main thinking there is, I want to avoid the confusion between this is something that's always used or this is something that's only used when this particular condition is set.
Yeah, I lean towards saying if it's specified, it should be used either way. Whether we create resources or don't create resources, we should use that name.
And if it's not specified, use the default service account.
I don't like that only because it makes it hard to grant permissions to the thing you just created. Like if you find out later you need to grant some permissions to the things running as part of that release without granting them to a whole bunch of other stuff that just happens to use the default service account.
No, I mean, we should never grant anything to the service account. I mean, use the service account if RBAC is basically disabled and use this as the default. That's what I meant. That's how it currently is. I mean, if RBAC create is true, you would always create a new service account and not change the default. Right?
I guess the question is, do you expect that to create that service account with the name that you specified? And then why would you want to specify a name for a service account if you're asking the chart to create it for you? Is there a reason for you to want that? I pasted a link to the existing claim stuff that I was talking about, this pattern that we use in the Drupal chart. And it says here, requires persistence enabled to be true. Right, actually, I guess that doesn't really matter. So then I guess the question here is, does it accept the existing claim whether or not? Or I guess if its existing claim is defined, you don't want to create a claim anyway. So yeah, it seems to me like I would only want to give the chart the name of a service. God, I'm really confusing things now.
No, it's okay.
What's the name of the thing we're talking about again here?
The sorry.
Service account.
Hey, where did I go? Service.
Yeah.
I mean,
So I think if I wanted to give a chart a service account name, I'd probably give it one that already exists. I don't really see a need of giving a chart the name that I wanted to create. That's not really a useful feature in my opinion, but I could be wrong in that.
What you're saying, you're saying companies have special policies regarding secret names and so on. In this case, they would certainly not allow to manage RBAC in a chart anyways. So they would do it externally, and that's just specify the service account name, and we can keep the best practice as it is. So no problem at all.
Yeah.
I mean, well, but then you're saying to people, if you want to be able to specify this, you can't do this as a one-stage process anymore. You have to externally manage all this other stuff. You're saying you have to. There's not right now, if we say you can specify the service account name and have this create the RBAC resources for you, we're saying you can do it that way, or you can still externally manage it. The option is yours. But just because there's often a lot of special logic around host names and credential names, I feel like those are two things that people should always be able to specify the names of, regardless of what else we are or aren't doing.
Are there certain charts where somehow this saves a lot of work, or is this something that would be applicable to all charts?
I mean, if a chart uses a service account, I feel like this should be applicable to any chart that uses service accounts.
I have to admit, I don't have as much experience working with this, so I don't have a lot to add to this one. Wish I did.
I know Matt Butcher commented on the issue that I filed related to it, but I don't think he was on this call. So
yeah.
So Kenzie, just to clarify what you're saying, you think that whether or not we're creating RBAC resources, the service account name should be honored, and we always use whatever's there.
yes, exactly.
So if a service account name is specified, we always honor it.
Yes,
And if it's not specified,
we always auto-generate one.
we always auto-generate one.
Except RBAC create is false.
So anytime RBAC create is false, we use the specified service name, and if one isn't specified, we auto-generate one, right? And so if somebody installs 10 different charts that use and have RBAC created false, we'll either use the name they specify or auto-create in all cases, right?
Yes,
And so they could end up, if they don't specify, 10 different service account names, right?
yes.
Okay, I haven't thought through this enough to have an opinion. I just wanted to clarify what was being said. So I don't have an opinion on this, but I understand what you're saying now. And Reinhard, if I understand it right, you're saying use the default one instead of creating a new one each time. Is that right? Is that the other?
I have to put that in YAML to see how it fits.
Do you have a link to Matt Butcher's opinion, by the way, whatever he said on it?
Yeah,
for an alternative.
Yeah. 1 second here. He basically just said, hang on, I'll find the issue that I filed. I think it's, what was it, 3299 or something.
Looking through this, though, it does seem like this falls into that earlier category we talked about before, KubeCon, about a space that's in need of best practices. Because I just kind of did a grab through the code base. And there are a number of charts who create service accounts. It would be good to.
We've had this best practice for quite a while now, and there's lots of charts now that use it the way I described it. So now we're changing it again.
Okay.
Oh, I know where I can find it. It'll be in my notifications.
So it sounds to me like this should probably be discussed offline in an issue or something. Yeah,
and I actually have an issue already filed, so give me 1 second and I will find that. Let's see. Okay, here we are. It is issue 3320 under Helm. And I'll paste that link in here. There we go.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I'll also cross-link this with that document charts best practices issue.
Okay.
So we never really quite got to that.
The PR that Reinhard was working on is linked in the top line. It's that JetStack Cert Manager PR. You have to kind of scroll down to a bit to get to the discussion, but as soon as you see my smiling face in there, you're there. It was actually kind of disappointing. I don't think there's a way to automatically, there's not like a nice, neat way to link to a discussion on a specific review comment in GitHub. You just have to paste the whole link in there if you want to do that.
Quick question just to wrap that tie together, because I just made that connection in GitHub. Would any of you want to be the people that take on the domain topic or the domain or topic of the best practice for service accounts and charts when we get to that other issue, or do you want to just leave that for later? Seems like a few of you are pretty interested in this, or have a lot of
I'll definitely participate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we'll see how this issue plays out. I think like everyone who has opinions on this, definitely take a look at 3320 and we'll see how that plays out and then make a decision on what we want to do with the best practices there. It's also a question of Matt seems to mention changing Pillar to do something, and I don't know what exactly he has in mind for that. So I don't know if this applies to charts or whether it's something that needs to happen in Helm.
That makes sense.
Yeah, maybe we should bring it up. Maybe we should bring it up on the Helm call this week and see where that goes.
That's a good idea. Yeah, my instinct is that this should just be confined to charts. I don't think Helm should treat or Tiller should treat service accounts in any special way, but there might be a reason to doing that.
Yeah. So we can bring it up there as well and just see what ends up falling out if there's time.
Yep.
If nobody else is in that call on Thursday, I'll be there and I can bring it up.
Perfect.
All right. So Reinhard, if you could make pointers in that issue with your stuff in there as well of the discussion, just to kind of fill out, so Butcher and whoever else gets involved in it, we can have the full on all sides, at least cross-linked in. That would be useful. And anybody else who's got those things, just throw them on this issue so we can have a good conversation here. And a good point when somebody comes back to it and says, you did it wrong, we can say, but we talked it out. Here's the issue, right? And maybe I'll even memorize the issue so I can be like Brian Grant, who just starts rattling issue numbers off and be like, it was 3320, man. Just go reference over there. You'll see it's complicated, right?
Exactly.
All right.
3320 really does roll off the tongue there. So, it's a good issue.
It is. It's a great number to happen across. All right.
I'm glad I picked a good number.
Yeah. It was all your choice. You're like, what number rolls? Oh, look what the world gave me.
You were waiting for 3319 to happen. Right.
Hurry up, 3319. I don't want you.
Yeah, and you got lucky this week because Butcher was the issue Sherpa, and so he's the one going through curating all of these things, right, and has to attack him. So that's why you got him this week. He volunteered. He voluntold himself to do it. All right. Is there anything else on this one? I guess not. No. We got 4 minutes left in our time. Wow, we're using the whole time up today. Is there anything else anybody wanted to bring up?
Just welcome back.
Yeah, welcome back.
Soon to be welcome, soon for more activity. I mean, I know for myself, I'm planning on, putting in some more time here after a bit of a break.
Good. Yeah, I was going to say, there's two things. Could everybody go out and review some charts? Because that would be awesome.
Right.
In fact, there's some easy ones in there that have already been okay to test. They're easy if people want to go merge them. And then the other one is there's an Ethereum chart. Does anybody know Ethereum?
No.
Not as an application. I know what it does, but I actually have a friend who wrote a book about cryptocurrencies recently. So,
well, the Ethereum chart actually deploys mining stuff into a Kubernetes cluster. And so for
blockchain charts.
You what?
There are more blockchain-related charts. I'm currently reviewing. I don't know the stuff either, but someone has to review it.
Yeah, well, my fear was I went in there and they had a default account or something in the blockchain. I'm like, wait. Is this thing about to just start mining on test runs and make somebody money? And so I don't know enough to know how this stuff works yet. And I figured instead of me going and learning to make sure that nobody's doing this, our test runs are mining for people.
I will say that is something we need to watch out for and be vigilant to, just because the people who do that stuff are getting more and more clever. When I worked at CoreOS, the Quay team actually had an issue with somebody taking advantage of builders on Quay.io to mine cryptocurrencies.
And it's long been a problem in public clouds where people go get those free accounts and then burn them to mine crypto. And they go get all these, free little card things like Azure was handing them out at one point and stuff. You get these things and then you go use it. You burn the free resources real quick to mine crypto. In fact, a lot of people, there have been a number of cases where people have had their cloud accounts hacked so that other people will burn crypto on them and make money off of it by hacking into somebody's cloud accounts. That is a more common occurrence than you'd think. Yeah. So yeah, we do. And that's why I saw this and I'm being like I'm not okaying to test this thing until I'm absolutely sure. Okay. That's all.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we want to reach out with, Kenzie, if the person who wrote that book is willing to maybe take a look, if they know anything about Kubernetes, that would be good. Or, I'm sure there's someone, who knows a thing or two about cryptocurrencies that we can ask, that we can put into.
I'll ping him and ask, and if he doesn't have the specific domain knowledge or isn't willing to do it, maybe he'll at least know somebody who is.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That would be fantastic. Yeah. I mean, we want to let these in, but we just want to make sure that they don't abuse us either.
Then the other question is, is it that big of a concern given that there is a timeout for these tests generally, and they're not going to, run for a long period of time?
I think my concern is on the user end is if somebody grabs the chart and just starts trying to figure out how to run it locally and is messing around with that, and then they start making a whole bunch of money for somebody else, and that kind of thing.
Maybe the easiest option is to make sure they don't have a default account and do the kind of Minecraft thing where you have to set EULA to true to be able to actually deploy the thing, and that's worked quite well for Minecraft, and I think that would definitely help here.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I pointed out. I didn't realize the Minecraft chart did that, and so I'll use that as a reference. Okay.
Cool. I got to run, but I did have a quick question to the group. How do we feel about these alternating meetings and also the time slot?
Yeah, I think it's good to have it every 2 weeks. I think an hour is long enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely used to go over the 30 minutes that we used to have before, and that was weekly. So I think having 2 weeks, 1 hour is, a doable time, and actually gives us time to actually talk things out as well. So
the only thing I'd say is the particular time is a little inconvenient for people on the East Coast, but I know people on the West Coast don't want to have to be getting up at 6:30 in the morning to make it to the office in time for the Helm call. So.
Yeah, and then there's the folks in Europe, right?
Yeah.
There's nobody in Europe. That place doesn't exist.
Yeah, time zones are hard.
Yeah.
Let's not mention the folks in Asia or Australasia.
Yeah. If anybody didn't realize it, they have had some choice words to say about the times of our meetings being all around Pacific time and on the other side of the world from them. So.
I bet.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're a minute over. Thanks, everyone. This is great. We've been consistent with these meetings and had great discussion. Thanks, everyone. This is fantastic. I love it.
This one was good.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, y'all. See y'all online.
Later.
Yep. See you there. Thanks.
Bye.